Welcome to CPF Firewire, a podcast from California professional firefighters where we discuss a wide range of issues affecting firefighters, our unions, our families, and the communities we serve.
Hello and welcome to the CPF Firewire. I'm Brian Rice and I'm the president of the California Professional Firefighters. Every year in California, we face ever-increasing threats from catastrophic wildfire, flooding, always the possibility of a major earthquake, and now pandemics. And the COVID-19 pandemic has only heightened the importance of crisis response in California. And California's got an unmatched mutual aid system. And in the middle of these various challenges is the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, what we know as Cal-OES, or what many of us just refer to as OES. And many of the special operations that were pioneered in California came by way of OES and have gone on to become national models. This includes specialized USAR Task Forces and our flood response. Many of you, if you work in an all-risk fire department in the state of California, you have been involved in some type of a OES mutual aid response. I feel very comfortable in saying that. And today, I'm really pleased to welcome our friend and colleague, Mark Ghilarducci, the director of Cal-OES. And Director Ghilarducci has spent over 30 years in emergency management at the state and national level. In particular, he was one of the people who helped invent the the USAR Task Force model and implement it not just in California, but throughout the country. Director Ghilarducci has been, and we'll talk about it. We're all firefighters and emergency service workers. We never want to say that we've seen it all, but I think on major incidents that affect not only the state of California, but this nation, Mark has seen more than most. So with that, Director Ghilarducci, welcome to the CPF Firewire.
Thanks, Brian, and great to be with you today, and appreciate you giving me the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Mark, you've been involved in disaster response at the state and federal level since the 80s. How did you become not just interested, but kind of just how did your career paths progress? How'd you get here?
Well, it's a great question. It really has been a journey. As a youngster, probably like many in the fire service, I was intrigued through shows like Emergency and I since I had a sense of public service early on through scouting, went through the ranks of scouting and all. And then really, I was very much an outdoors person. I spent a lot of time climbing and hiking, and I was in the backcountry most of my weekends, very much outdoors. And so I really gravitated towards the whole concept of search and rescue and predominantly mountain rescue. And so really started to hone skills with regards to using all of the techniques and procedures and things that they use in mountain rescue operations. And spent time working in Yosemite National Park in the summers as part of the technical rescue operations there and in the backcountry. And all of that was just, I was just kind of just taken by the fact that, you could use all of these capabilities to be able to do these complex rescues that took place. At the same time, I started to get involved with local fire and I was very intrigued by the whole heavy rescue program that was taking place at the time. There was a kind of a mentor that many of us had, Jim Mendoza out of Tuolumne County and Columbia College, who's leading a lot of the heavy rescue stuff. But much of the heavy rescue components and techniques that were being utilized were really being pulled from the wilderness mountain rescue community, using all of the ropes and the systems and all of that, all being transferred, that information technology into the fire service. And then I went to medic school and a long time ago, 1978, in Los Angeles, and spent time working, between there and up in the Bay Area in both search and rescue and local fire and local EMS. And then I was actually I went to University of California, Davis, and I was on my way to med school. And I had been so much involved with this kind of what we called, before it was called special operations, but really was sort of special operations of dealing with these unique things. I was reached out to by folks at the state who reached out to me and kind of were following my background and asked if I'd be interested in coming on board to help them design and develop a specialized capability that the state of California did not have. And that was this ability to have a multifunctional capability to respond to structural collapse. We had just had the 85 Mexico City earthquake. And
I remember that.
As you remember, it was a devastating quake. We had sent down some resources from California, fire, mutual aid. Mostly these were folks they weren't called urban search and rescue those days because the term didn't exist, but they were folks that took those heavy rescue skills, which were predominantly used in vehicle accidents and over the side rescues, and they had cribbing and they had ropes and pry bars, and they went down there and tried to help save lives. And I think the folks at the time here at OES recognized that we were in line for some major earthquake like that was going to happen in California, and we just weren't prepared. We did not have the capacity to deal with it. And so they asked if I would be interested in coming on board to design, research and design and build out a capability which would be something that would be novel to the state of California, and it would build on the heavy rescue programs that existed currently in the state. And so I deferred going to med school to jump on this. It was very interesting to me. And
hold on there. You were on the track to go to medical school?
Yeah, that's correct.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I actually even interviewed at medical colleges, and I just deferred and decided this is so cool. I want to do that. And they thought it would be, a couple of years or a year or something. So I deferred for at least a year. You're allowed 2 deferments before you got to make a decision. And just within the first year, I was hooked and never looked back. Since then, been with the state of California many years, but I did leave for some period of time. I went to the federal government for 5 years at FEMA as at the time, a new congressionally appropriated program called the Federal Coordinating Officer. It's a presidential appointee, and what the federal coordinating officers do is they manage the federal disaster on behalf of the White House. And so I took that on. It was a cool job, and I learned a ton about the federal system. I did that for 5 years, and then came back here to OES and as the chief deputy director. Working quite an honor to work with somebody who well, Mr. Dallas Jones, who was once the secretary treasurer for CPF and became the director of OES and is a good friend. And so Dallas and I had the opportunity to work together to shape some of OES activities, and then which carried us through like 9/11 and stuff. And then I left the state government for about 12 years. I went to the private sector and did crisis management work all over the world for the State Department and for all different kinds of other entities, which was fascinating and a learning experience. And then came back here in 2012 as the director under Governor Brown. So it's been a phenomenal journey, and one I was here at OES Fire Rescue as one of the chief officers for years, and leaving built the special operations program here, and part of that is the story that I think we'll talk about, is particularly this whole concept of this urban search and rescue program and how we did it.
Yeah, and I would, number one, quite a story. I mean, I knew that your depth of involvement in emergency services was pretty broad, but I didn't know that it was that broad. Want to talk to you about USAR and the early days of USAR, from kind of where we started to where we are today. You and I both know that they were national incidents, but they were worldwide incidents. The Murrah building in Oklahoma City, in September 11th. I can't remember if it was a Skylab or a shuttle or a satellite that, debris spread kind of over a wide swath of the U.S. and it was the collection of that. We've had mudslides and, you were kind of ground zero. Tell us about how USAR really kind of germinated and grew into what it is today.
Early on when I took on this assignment, I actually picked up and moved from Sacramento to Southern California for this period of time because just because of the nature of the concern is like the big concern was the big event, the big earthquake that was going to be hitting the Los Angeles basin. Really wanted to focus in there, and so in '88 we began the process. I convened all these folks. I brought them all together, and I wanted to learn from them about where were the challenges, what really could a more amplified program look like. But at the same time, I also started to research internationally how this, what could a very comprehensive, multifaceted technical rescue program look like. And we researched programs in France, the French, the Brits, the Swiss, the Germans. All of them built programs that came out of World War II, where they had multiple bombings of buildings, and they had to do much like what we're seeing in Ukraine today. They're doing heavy rescue, heavy search and rescue, moving large debris to be able to rescue people. And they honed these capabilities. And at that time, they were far ahead of the United States with regards to this capability. So I went there, I met with them, I brought them here. We built working groups that within the state that talked about what would be the vision of this. And this was a multi-pronged approach. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be, we're going to build one thing and it's a one and done. We had to look at this from how do we build a comprehensive capacity to be able to deal with the state our size, right? We have earthquake threats and in the Bay Area and in LA, down to a better part of the state is earthquake prone. It's Cascadia subduction zone. And we have terrorist threats. We have all different kinds of things. And so we entered this process of building something that would start with these technical rescue teams. And what we learned from the Europeans was that we wanted to integrate capabilities that didn't necessarily always work together. And what that means is that we wanted to bring in people like engineers, doctors, or paramedics, search dogs, hazmat capabilities, communication specialists, and pull them all together in a unified way with rescue specialists that were from the fire service and the use of the incident command system, the way we manage incidents, to build this multifaceted team. Now you can imagine in doing so, you have now you've got all these stakeholder groups, right? You've got the medicals and you got the dogs, which are, by the way, at that time did not exist in the fire service. They were all volunteer and they were all on the wilderness rescue side. So we had this big initiative to train and cross-train them and make them USAR dogs, right? Which is a whole nother sort of, avenue on this whole thing. And then, bring all these folks together in a comprehensive way, build a training package around it, build doctrine around it, and be able to move that forward. And so we built out this plan for these teams, but the larger strategy included not just the teams, but also to ultimately enhance regional USAR capacity throughout the state, right? Part of that included taking the OES mutual aid engines, getting them all to type 3 level. So we had to build typing in through FireScope and the typing standards. So we now have a type 1 through 4 USAR typing. And, we were able to then take that typing and build different levels of training and capability. And that's where the regional task forces, the regional rig that you talked about a minute ago, Brian, was able to achieve a type 1 status. What the idea is that, we have these teams, these specialized teams, but they're not going to be foreign enough. And so by being able to have all these individual capabilities by typed resources throughout the state, that on a day-to-day basis, they're responding to their call volume, but we could pull them together through the mutual aid system and create task forces at the time. It basically is a force multiplier. We go from 8 task forces that we have now to 20 task forces if we need to. We can dial it up or dial it down as we need to. Now, at the same time, there were some other capabilities that were being developed in the country. Fairfax County Fire was in Virginia was building a capacity with the State Department and the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. Metro Dade Fire and Rescue in Florida was doing that, and of course, New York City with Ray Downey and that team there in Rescue 3 was really building out some of the capacities of really some innovative ways of using heavy rescue to be able to do building collapse. Because in New York, they were just having buildings fall down for no reason; they just would fall down, So right. they would go in and rescue these folks. So we took all that and we built out. Through all this effort, I wrote a plan and a program that went up on the governor's desk to be funded. And at the time was Governor George Duke Majan. It sat up there for a while, but a couple key events happened. At the first, there were hurricanes that hit the East Coast. One was Hurricane Andrew, and it literally decimated the community of Homestead, Florida. And it was a very devastating hurricane. And then Hurricane Hugo followed that in the the Carolinas. Both of them had dismal response operations. Not just the locals did the best they possibly could. The federal government and FEMA was just not existent at the time, and they were still caught up in a post-World War II, Cold War era emergency management construct, and they just weren't there. And then so we watched all that happen, and then we saw an event that happened here in California. It was the Loma Prieta earthquake. And if you remember, Loma Prieta earthquake was devastating to the Bay Area, collapsed the I-80 Cypress structure came down, and part of the Bay Bridge, and we had fires in the marina, and it collapsed a better part of downtown Santa Cruz. That immediately propelled us into the need to take the concepts that we had and start to bring them together. And that part of the concept was that concept of bringing together regional capability. So we started to identify, we'd already done this, identify all the regional heavy rescue crews and bring them together in a task force format to be able to respond to the Cypress structure collapse. We brought in people like Mendoza and others to go there to the site and work with Oakland Fire Department. I spent days down on the scene working with them on how to get those people out of that very complex situation. The next morning, the governor signed the budget and put that USAR program into place. And so we started off in California with $2.2 million to get this program going. Only place in the country that actually had a program. And to do that program, I had identified through these working groups and our capabilities, I had identified and handpicked the 8 teams that we currently have today. So Sacramento, Oakland, Menlo Park, LA City, LA County, Orange County, and San Diego and Riverside, right? So, and those teams were picked strategically, located in based upon where the earthquake threats were the greatest, based upon how one could support the other, how we could move them rapidly. And they were built at the time with the capability to load their equipment onto military aircraft. They met all the requirements and standards. We built training around it. And of course, we had to identify, all of us had to come in and bring resources to the table to formalize these teams. So that was in 89. So between 89 and 91, we were building this capacity in California, and we were using the money that we got, and it was exciting because we were now taking a European model. We were building that capacity. We were introducing new people to new people, the dogs, the docs, the engineers, and we're bringing them together with fire service people. And then Congress held hearings on the response predominantly to Hurricane Hugo and Andrew, but also included Loma Prieta earthquake. And they pretty much lambasted FEMA pretty bad about the fact that they did not have a national capacity to deal with these kinds of events. And so they directed FEMA to go and build a program. That then turned FEMA into coming to meet with us. And also members of Congress and members of Office of Management and Budget, came and met with us here at Cal-OES, and they loved the program that we were building and took that. They also met with Fairfax. They also met with Metro-Dade. And then they held a big forum in late '91, and it was the kickoff of the National Urban Search and Rescue Response System. We came up with the name Urban Search and Rescue. We wanted to have it different than Wilderness Search and Rescue, but in essence, that's how it was. As we identified it, these were the special forces of the fire service, right? These are the folks that actually, go in and do these complex operations. The federal government provided granting across the country. By the way, it was just the same amount of money that California had. So for 25 teams in the country, they had about $2 million. Now it's all changed and
Right.
They're well funded. But at the time, that's how they started the program. And California was a huge leader and advisor in that. I was appointed as a senior member to the National Advisory Board. I sat on that board for 10 years. You may wonder, why does California have 8 USAR task forces that are nationally recognized, and the rest of the country has either 1 or now maybe there's a couple that have 2. And that is because those 8 teams had already been grandfathered in. Those were the 8 teams we already had in place prior to. And the concept behind this is really important, I think, Brian, for me to talk about. The concept behind our system was that it was locally built, state supported, federally deployed, right? So, the first and foremost thing, why would a city manager or county board of supervisors or whatever want to engage into this national program? What were they going to get for it? Well, first of all, they built a capacity that didn't necessarily exist normally. They get state and federal dollars. They build their capacity. They build relationships. So, first of all, they have now an enhanced local capacity. Secondly, from a state perspective, we now have, to meet that strategy I was talking about, regional capacity, or the ability to move these assets throughout the state as part of the state's mutual aid system, right? And then thirdly, FEMA, when they need to call on them, basically outside of funding, they were able to call these folks, and we can move these task forces throughout the United States as necessary. They were originally designed for earthquake. Over the years, they've evolved into hurricane response and many other things that you mentioned. And the first deployment ever of this national system was in 1992 for Hurricane Iniki that hit the Hawaiian Islands.
Yes.
Yep, I was the team lead on that, and we deployed LA County Fire and Menlo Park Task Forces, Task Force 3, I think it is, in Menlo Park, and Task Force, I think LA County's 2. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But anyway, we deployed them to Hawaii, and that was the first of the deployment. That was early in '92, and then of course in the summer of '92, and then in '95. And then shortly after that, we had the Northridge earthquake hit Los Angeles, and the system as designed played out. All of that capability that existed deployed to respond to their own needs. LA City, LA County, Orange County, they all responded to meet their needs. We then amplified those response with all the other task forces that we had within the state, and we actually brought in a couple of outside task forces. So the design of being able to build that capacity and respond worked very, very well. And so that was in '92. It was a proof positive that the program was where it needed to be. And then, of course, in '95, when we had the Oklahoma City bombing, we deployed for that. I was, again, one of the first folks on the scene, and ended up being designated the incident commander for the whole USAR operation at the national level. And so we ended up moving, I think it was 11 or 12 USAR task forces, the first major deployment of task forces. And it was a very complex situation, but it gave us, again, that it was a sort of the proof of test of the system. The tools worked, that we have the right makeup, is it all working well? And of course, I think that history shows that was just a phenomenal operation. The teams just did a phenomenal job. Since then, of course, they had 9/11 and the towers collapse, and they've had multiple other kinds of a lot of tornado events and hurricane events they responded to. Along that way, Brian, we also recognized that California needed to take what was essentially a very unstandard approach to swiftwater flood rescue, and build a much like we did with the USAR program. We had taken the typing, we had put it into the field operation guide under the 120-1 guidelines, which outlined how we would operate in the state. And then we did the same thing for swiftwater and flood rescue. We had working groups come together. Another program I put together and funded at the state level, working with people like Jim Segerstrom from Rescue 3 and Larry Collins from LA County Fire, and so many more folks that came to the table and basically built this phenomenal thing. So used to be that, you see our swiftwater flood rescue teams now, man, they are decked out. They have all the right PPE. They're professionals. They know how to do it. That was never the case before. It was maybe a life jacket, or, if you're lucky, you had a life jacket, and there were firefighters that drowned trying to rescue people. And it was just
one right here in Sacramento.
We did. I remember that guy.
Yes,
that's right.
I'll tell you, Mark, just this history lesson, as I sit here and think, as you were kicking this off, I was a young firefighter, just starting out. Our tools were Hearst, cutter and spreaders, a K1200, and whatever pry bars we had, and then our own ingenuity. When we got hired, we were put on the line. And then after several months of line work, we went to the Sacramento City Drill Tower. The night we were supposed to report to the drill tower in 86, remember the major floods in Sacramento in 86?
I do.
And so I'm going to go to our swiftwater rescue. We were given wetsuits that were 2-piece and about 6 mil, bring your own tennis shoes. I remember wading through apartment complexes, carrying people out to dry land, and you just back and forth. And I remember specifically a couple of firefighters detailed in a pickup truck to patrol the levee looking for boils. That was the sum total that was our swiftwater rescue. If you had a wetsuit, you were in the water. And if you didn't, you may have been in the water anyway. And we didn't have anything. And now I look back because kind of towards the end of my career and as a rescue captain, I was never a boat operator, but yes, went to the swiftwater classes and boat operator classes. But to watch how we have evolved in that to what I believe is a premier operation in swiftwater response. When I sit here and look at it, those things developed in less than a decade, and it was so rapid. And I think most of us on the job, Mark, I'll just speak for the members I represent. Most of us didn't realize how central you were to that. I didn't know that. And I probably know you as well as many. And so that kind of brings me to this. What do you see, on the horizon for USAR? We've just been through the pandemic. We know the things that work. We know the response capabilities. What do you see in the future for our USAR task forces?
That's a good question. Before I answer that, let me say on my piece, I always saw my role here as being one to work to bring the whole, using the power of this office to bring everybody together and to support and provide vision and make things happen. So it's not about me or OES. It's about our capacity in California to deal with these events, and wanting firefighters to have all the resources that they possibly needed and be as relevant and cutting edge as possible. So I think we've gotten there, and we're continuing to get there, and it plays into where USAR is going. The USAR program has changed a lot. When I became the director here, I'm still tangentially engaged, but not as what I was when I was more hands-on. I think we have to remember that our USAR program is beyond the 8 designated national teams. It's the regional, USAR capacity for everything that I talked about earlier and why that's so critical to the state of California. It is the ability to broaden that capacity and build it into our response plans and build additional partnerships, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know how big of an event we're going to see, and we need we need force multipliers to be able to address that. I also think it's important to understand that with climate change happening, we are seeing extreme climate-driven disasters more frequently today. Extreme tornado and hurricane operations take place at the same exact time that we're seeing extreme wildfire operations. Now, used to be more seasonal, right? We would be sort of out of wildfire season when hurricane season was happening. I mean, there was a time where, and the hurricanes, as bad as they were always still manageable with the resources that were there. Now it's the point where there's a call for all resources all the time. And we have to step back a second and think about that California during wildfires, we're first and foremost is our ability to respond to the needs of California. It's very difficult for me to support sending teams out, 500 or 1,000 USAR folks out to a hurricane when I'm asking for resources from Australia and Canada to fight wildfires. That said, we are also using USAR capabilities in a way we've never had in wildfire response and recovery. We moved USAR teams up to the Paradise to Camp Fire. We've moved them up into Berry Creek during the fire there. The search and rescue that needs to take place, that systematic, sophisticated capability that the USAR teams bring to the table, have been utilized to go in and help identify victims that are caught up in the wildfire and be able to get them out. Many of that requires technical equipment and things to cut and break and get down to where these victims are. And that is hugely helpful and so critical for us to be able to close these incidents and address the total number of fatalities and things. And then I also think that the use of technology, more sophisticated ways to more rapidly identify people that are collapsing buildings where they're actually at, so that the USAR teams can target their effort and it basically buy down the time it takes from search and identification to actually retrieving that person, right? Thereby hopefully saving more lives in these events. And then lastly, I think that we have to understand that when we do get the big earthquake here, whether it's in the Bay Area or in Los Angeles Basin, there's going to be a lot of work to go around. There's going to be a lot of prioritization that needs to take place. And we're going to all have to be working and rowing in the same direction to be able to effectively get those teams in place and saving people as much as we possibly can.
You brought something up and I hadn't really put a lot of thought into it, but I think we across the state are probably, we probably need to, and that was the regionalization. The fact that we've got these regional teams that can respond into, I think we all know that, but we don't necessarily always think in that manner. We always think we have 8 teams, do this, we do that, we do this, but we actually have a broader satellite network in this state that's up and prepared to go to these things. In the wildfire season and demand on USAR and demand on firefighters, we've seen some critical times in the last couple of years. And it at a time or two, I was not necessarily in the middle, but in the fringe. Tempers were high. But I think we're finding ourselves in a spot in California, and you brought it up. Our wildfire and hurricane seasons have collided head on. It's a difficult spot to protect the state and maintain that protection. Firefighters, we want to go to everything. If it's happening, honestly, by nature of our personalities, our job, our training, if it's happening, we want to be there. And I think now as we mature in this area, it's bound on us as California firefighters and emergency service responders. We've got to broaden our thinking from checkers to chess. We're coming into a spot in May through November. We have our things that we have to pay attention to, but it's almost like every firefighter in the state pay attention to what's going on in the hurricane zone. and into these other areas and do that same strategic thinking, because, quite frankly, we have a huge state to protect and a huge population to protect. And the wildfire danger is, it's different than a hurricane. And in a way, there's a part of me that goes, it's a lot more treacherous. A weather pattern can move in and move out. You don't have any control over a wildfire, where it goes, when it goes, how it goes. It's weather driven. And I think for us as firefighters and emergency responders, we need to start employing a chess mentality on our response. It's not just about this county or that county. If we got a county that's involved in a region, we all need to pay attention to the entire state and be sensitive to, where our needs are, where the needs could come next. And I thought just listening to you on that really geared me into a way of thinking that I think we need to mature.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a lot of what we do here at the State Operations Center. We have these multiple events going on. It's not uncommon where we'll have, multiple fires, and we've got, in 2020, we had the COVID response going statewide. We had statewide civil unrest happening. We had at least 18 fires burning at the same time. Several of them were catastrophic wildfires that were burning communities down. We had a domestic terrorist event happening in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There was a lot going on at the same time. And so you have to, that's where the chessboard comes in, right? Yeah. That's where you have to be able to effectively do it. And when you're on the ground and ready to respond, you don't necessarily have sense of what the larger chessboard looks like. And that's why we're here in California. Look, we operate in a state of one of the most powerful, most sophisticated mutual aid systems in the world. Our ability to do situational awareness and gather situational awareness, to take that intelligence and turn it into decision-making information is unlike any other place. And, it is a nation state. So we're responding like we would a country. And so that needs to be taken in. I am the first person that wants to send our people all over to help. But I also have to understand that, it has to be strategic and it has to be taken into account when we have our own issues. It can't leave our state hanging out there, and we can't leave any of our local governments. It's not just the state. The state and local governments, we're political subdivisions of each other, and we support each other every step of the way. And the USAR program was built from day one with the concept of local, region, state, because it's built on the mutual aid system that we have. It was built around the concept of that system. And so, as time changes and people come and go and retirements happen, sometimes they lose sight of that whole piece of what the chessboard looks like and how important that really is.
I want to ask you, as our OES director, in the course of your tenure so far, how many states of emergency have you been involved in, whether state or federal?
Wow, that's a great question. Hundreds and hundreds of states of emergency. I mean, it's just, I can tell you since 2015, 2013, 14, but mostly 15 on, we've seen dramatic increase in the number of states of emergencies. We've seen concurrently a dramatic increase in the number of federal major disaster declarations, right? So prior to 2013, we had maybe 3 major disaster declarations in the 5 years preceding. Since 2015, we've had something like 28 major disaster declarations. Okay, so major disasters are presidential disaster declarations, the highest level that we get. Then there's all the stuff in between, the states of emergency, there's stuff that we don't get federal for responding to. We are a busy state, and we've seen everything. Yeah. We've seen major earthquakes, we've seen flooding, we've seen infrastructure collapse with the Oroville spillway, we've seen terrorist activity, San Bernardino, Santa Cruz. We've seen wildfire, drought. We're in the drought now, which is precipitating, additional wildfire challenges. And we've seen economic, and of course, we've seen the pandemic. I mean, we had a tsunami just a month ago hit the entire coast of California. From the event that happened in countries far away from here, but they impact the state of California. And we have a cyber threat that's unbelievable right now that's going on because of the geopolitical issues around the world. But the target is California. I mean, we spend a lot of time here doing lots of different things in that chessboard that you talk about, Brian. But we have to take that all into consideration. And thus, I want everybody to know, listening to this, that all of this is going on. And look, anybody wants to come up and embed with us for a while and do a couple weeks here and get a sense of what happens at OES and how we manage all this stuff, I'm always open for that. And it gets you a better sense of how we have to manage all these things.
Mark, I just want to thank you for your time, for joining us today. We could go on and on and on. And I think I speak for every firefighter in the state of California, both past, present, and future. This was a great learning experience for all of us and gives us a little bit better depth on all the things that are going on behind the scene, literally to keep California safe, from natural disasters to man-made disasters, and everything in between. I just want to thank you for your time. We are going to do this again. We just can't cover it in one session. And we're coming up on fire season. Mark, I know that we'll be talking a lot. And I thank you for your time. Again, for everybody listening out there, Director Mark Ghilarducci, our director for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Mark, any parting words you want to add?
My only parting words is to thank every firefighter, member of the fire service listening to this. We couldn't do it without you. And every year we ask more and more of you. I couldn't be prouder of the California Fire Service and, to be a member of that crew, to work with you all. And so thank you for what you're doing. You're deeply appreciated.
To everybody out there, that is Director Mark Ghilarducci, Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And for CPF Firewire, until next time, I'm Brian Rice, and everybody be careful out there. Thank you.
You can find CPF Firewire at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you find podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You can also find CPF Firewire at the CPF website, www.cpf.org, and on the CPF YouTube page. We're always interested in getting your feedback, comments, and criticism. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. Drop us a line, info@cpf.org. CPF Firewire is a production of California Professional Firefighters. Our producer is Carol Wills. Our engineer is Matt McDermott. Please join us next month for another edition of CPF Firewire.